afternoon. You're watching Freedom. It's time for a roundup of Tuesday's top news. I'm Mikhail Baranov in the studio, and I'll be telling you about the most important events and facts at this hour. 4 people were killed and 16 wounded, including a 14-year-old teenager. These are the consequences of a Russian strike on Slovyansk in the Donetsk region. This morning, the Russians dropped at least 2 guided aerial bombs on a residential area in the city center. It's known that 6 apartment buildings and 10 cars were damaged. An investigative team, paramedics, patrol police, and emergency services are working at the scene.
I was washing dishes in the sink, got up from the window, and as soon as I stood up, that was it. Everything happened. Second floor.
I was sitting in the kitchen on the first floor. It hit, and I was like, damn, refrigerator, fuck, I just closed that fridge. Well, it just sprayed me with shrapnel.
There's a piece of shrapnel.
Elise, you weren't here, right? What? Were you here?
Yes, I was here. You see, it hit me on the head.
This morning, Russian occupiers deliberately struck a police car in Nikopol with an FPV drone. This is the Dnipro region. During the second attack, the building of the Nikopol District Police Department and several more service vehicles were damaged. 2 of them burned down completely. Sive, law enforcement officers were injured, 1 police officer is in serious condition, and a local resident was also wounded. In addition, a rescue vehicle that arrived to evacuate the wounded was damaged. In the morning, Russian occupiers attacked Kherson with drones. 3 civilians were wounded. The victims suffered concussions, blast injuries, and closed head traumas. They've already been taken to the hospital in moderate condition. Also, according to local authorities, Russian shelling damaged residential buildings and 2 civilian cars burned down. Fires that broke out at the sites of the drone strikes were quickly extinguished by rescue workers. At least 10 people, including a 12-year-old child, were injured as a result of a massive Russian drone attack on Dnipro. About a dozen apartment buildings were damaged in the city, as well as a bank, a school, and a kindergarten. The police are accepting reports of property damage. Natalia Husak will tell us about another sleepless night in Dnipro.
Everything here was ripped out, even the handles. That's how powerful the blast wave was.
Tatiana's apartment is covered in shards, and the walls and furniture are marked by shrapnel. The woman lives on the 4th floor. A Russian Shahed drone exploded right outside her windows, hitting a tree. The wreckage and parts of the drone were scattered all around the area near the building.
There was a loud rumble, like a Shahed flying by, but we thought it would just pass by and didn't get up. And then the glass started flying. The power went out and they told us, get out quickly, there's a fire. It was terrifying. The shrapnel flew everywhere and everything shredded.
Attack drones struck Dnipro at around 11 p.m. Explosions rocked the central part of the city. The worst hit was this 9-story building. The residents say drones fly over them often. They thought this time the drones would just pass through as well.
It was flying really low. The first one passed by low. We were sitting in the hallway with my child. The first one passed by low, and it felt like it was going to hit our building. My hands were shaking so much, I couldn't even take my medicine because I kept dropping the pills. It was really scary.
Next to this building, the windows were blown out in both the school and the kindergarten. In another area, the bank building was badly damaged. Residents of Dnipro say that the powerful explosions could be heard even far from their epicenters.
It's lively here. My sister and I take turns, but the sound over there was terrible. I can only imagine how bad it was. My neighbor said everything was blown out. All the windows in these nearby buildings were just gone.
As a result of the Russian attack, 10 people were injured, including a 12-year-old child. 2 people are under medical supervision, while the others have cuts and minor injuries. More than a dozen apartment buildings sustained various degrees of damage.
About 1,000 windows were shattered in the apartment buildings. All the windows in the neighboring gymnasium were blown out, and in several kindergartens, the damage is minor. Since
morning, nearly 100 utility workers and special equipment are working at the drone strike sites. They've already cleared tons of glass, debris, and branches from the streets. Natalia Husak and Volodymyr Stongolov reporting from Dnipro for Freedom TV.
1 person was injured as a result of a Russian attack on the Sumy region. This was reported by the local military administration. In total, over the past day, the Russian Federation Army shelled settlements in the region 44 times. Residential buildings, a TV tower, and energy infrastructure were damaged. For 2 days in a row, Russian occupiers have been attacking Kharkiv with strike drones. Last night, a drone dove between apartment buildings in the industrial district. 8 people were injured, and this morning there was another series of attacks. Hits were recorded in private homes. 4 more people sought medical help. Details of the Russian strikes in the report by Natalia Bilakudri.
On the evening of March 9th, a Russian attack drone struck a residential area in one of Kharkiv's districts. The explosion happened between apartment buildings. Parked cars immediately caught fire. According to the regional prosecutor's office, the Russians attacked civilians with a Geron 2 type drone. 66-year-old Piotr came in the morning to see the aftermath of the Russian drone hitting the building. He doesn't live here. This is his children's apartment. His courtyard was already shelled 2 weeks ago, the retiree said. Back then, their apartment was badly damaged.
All the windows fell out, the ceiling collapsed, the doors, both the front and the interior, were destroyed. They spent 3 years renovating, but they haven't even lived there yet, haven't even moved in. They brought in some things, but haven't even lived there, and now the building's damaged.
While they were dealing with the aftermath of the strike in this area, Russian occupiers launched new attacks. The first explosion happened in the middle of the night on March 10th. It hit non-residential buildings, and the second one was early in the morning. A drone attacked the private sector.
We clearly heard the terrifying sound of Shahed drones falling from the sky. It was this accelerating sound. We ran out into the hallway where there are no windows. We shielded the kids with our bodies. Literally in a split second. We didn't even have time, to react. I just turned to hug my child. And then suddenly there was this crazy explosion, so loud it even cracked. We ran outside and saw that the windows and doors were all intact. And then we saw our neighbor. There was some smoke coming from his side. So we called him right away, and his windows cut him a little. We rushed over to help immediately. We brought some peroxide and everything we could to treat his wounds, because he said, "I'm covered in blood."
Medics arrived at the impact site right away and provided assistance to 4 injured people. Andre shows a fragment from the UAV that he found on the street.
Honestly, I don't know. It looks like flaps, but that's just a guess. We came after the fact when everything had already happened. All services were already working here. We just came and joined in.
According to city officials, more than 6 private homes were damaged in the area after a series of strikes. Cars and electrical networks were damaged. The consequences are being dealt with at the scene. Kharkiv's public utilities are helping people rebuild their homes. Natalia Belakudria, Andrei Damokhle with Kharkov for Freedom TD channel.
In total, on Tuesday night, Russian occupiers attacked Ukraine, launching 137 attack UAVs. Ukrainian Air Force defenders shot down and suppressed 122 Russian drones with electronic countermeasures. UAV hits were recorded at 10 locations, and downed debris fell at another 10. Ukrainian Special Operations Forces struck Russian army targets in the temporarily occupied parts of Donetsk region. Specifically, in Makiivka, explosions hit a storage base and fuel and lubricants distribution points, and in neighboring Donetsk, the Volna-free electronic warfare station. As noted by the Ukrainian military, destroying the enemy's fuel depots and electronic warfare systems undermines its ability to detect and destroy aerial targets, as well as supply its own units with fuel. Ukrainian Defense Forces eliminated 950 Russian occupiers on the front lines over the past day. Thus, the total combat losses of Russian forces since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine have reached nearly 1,275,000 soldiers. In addition, according to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Ukrainian troops destroyed 13 Russian tanks, 7 armored combat vehicles, 73 artillery systems, 4 multiple-launch rocket systems, and 2 air defense systems yesterday. In addition, Ukrainian forces are conducting active offensive operations in certain areas of the front in Donetsk region. This was reported by the commander-in-chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, Oleksandr Syrsky. The general visited the units and subdivisions of the Ukrainian defenders. He noted that despite the constant attempts by Russian troops to break through Ukrainian defenses, the armed forces of Ukraine continue to hold their positions and counterattack.
The enemy is suffering significant, sometimes critical losses in manpower and equipment. Ukrainian units are effectively using drone systems, artillery, and remote mining, steadily reducing the combat potential of Russian forces and disrupting their offensive plans. Oleksandr Syrsky, Commander-in-Chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, on Telegram.
There were 130 combat engagements recorded on the front lines over the past day. Per Ukraine's general staff, Russian troops failed twice to breach defenses near Kupiansk, 3 times in southern Slo'byansk, and 5 times on both the Lyman and Alexandrivka bridgeheads, plus 11 more Russian attacks. Ukrainian forces stopped them in the Slovyansk sector of the front, 13 times in the Kostiantynivka sector, 28 times in the Hoyaypole sector, and 29 times in the Pokrovsk sector. Military experts note that the invaders have not achieved their objectives, either in Pokrovsk or in Zaporizhzhia.
It's already been 2 years, and they still haven't been able to accomplish their objectives in the entire Pokrovsko-Mirnograd agglomeration, so to speak. Our forces there, in both Grishino and Rodinivsko, are engaged in combat operations. They keep fighting and don't let the enemy carry out these plans, although, at least partially, they are once again redeploying forces from this area to specific strategic locations where, as they see it, they need to significantly ramp up combat operations, including, from this perspective, to reinforce their positions in those particular directions. And now, in the Zaporizhzhia region north of Hoyaypole, the situation is developing. That is exactly how they're responding right now.
The president of the European Council, Antonio Costa, hopes that the European Union will extend sanctions against Russia tomorrow and approve new ones. He stated this while speaking at the annual conference of EU ambassadors in Brussels. Costa emphasized that Europe must continue to apply sanctions pressure on the Russian Federation so that Moscow agrees to a just and lasting peace that is acceptable to Ukraine and one that does not undermine the security of all of Europe. Commenting on the conflict in the Middle East, Costa called for preventing escalation, since only Moscow stands to benefit from it.
So far, there's only one winner, Russia. It is steadily undermining Ukraine's position by violating international law. It is gaining new resources to finance the war against Ukraine as energy prices rise. It benefits from the diversion of military forces that could have been directed to support Ukraine. And it gains from the decreased attention to the Ukrainian front as the conflict in the Middle East takes center stage.
Latvia is urging the European Union to provide Kyiv with a €90 billion loan as soon as possible. The country's finance minister, Kristupas Vaitikupas, emphasized that Kyiv must receive the promised funding because Russia poses a threat to the EU. He made this statement ahead of the European Union's Economic and Financial Affairs Council meeting in Brussels. The minister also added that the war in Ukraine remains the main topic on the European agenda.
Financial assistance for Ukraine should begin to be distributed in April when the country will need the necessary resources, and I hope a solution will be found. Frozen Russian assets would be the best solution. We've been talking about this from the very beginning, and of course, now we need to move quickly with the loan. Time is running out. But after that, we'll still have to return to the issue of Russia's frozen funds, and maybe we'll have to use them for Ukraine's needs.
Putin needs money for the war, so against the backdrop of the conflict in the Middle East, he'll want to start selling oil and gas again to the European Union. But Europeans should not only reject such proposals, but also impose even stricter sanctions against Moscow, Kristupas added. His Irish colleague, Simon Harris, voiced the same position. He emphasized that the EU must keep up the pressure on the Russian Federation and force it to come to the negotiating table. For this, the European Union needs to use all available economic levers. Harris expressed a deep regret that it still hasn't been agreed upon, the 20th package of sanctions against the Russian Federation.
It is absolutely vital for Europe to remain steadfast in its belief that economic sanctions against Russia are a crucial and indispensable instrument in the ongoing collective effort to end the war on the European continent. And the idea that Putin and Putin's Russia could in any way profit financially from the conflict, pain, and trauma in the Persian Gulf region would be absolutely appalling. This highlights the importance of de-escalating the conflict in the Persian Gulf region, as well as the importance of not losing sight of Ukraine and showing solidarity with our European friends and with Ukraine.